Yeah, I'll stop using my colorful language.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate everybody taking the time out of your day, wanting to learn what's going on, how to contribute, how to participate a little bit more, and get a status of, where we're at, what we are doing moving forward, and all that fun stuff. So those who don't know my voice already, my name's Rachel Marquez. I'm the CAMS program manager, and I work for Los Angeles County in the Internal Services Department. We run the entire enterprise GIS system for LA County, which means I've taken on some additional roles over the past month, which is why I'm always so divided right now. But we're moving forward, we're moving ahead, and I think the CAMS modernization effort that we've all been going through together over the last year is really coming to a point that we could start really, getting on the backbones of everything that we need to get done to make sure that it works for all the cities in LA County, to ensure that the collaboration and the participation's there, so that we all have a unified understanding of what's going on with the data, where is the data going to, how it's being used in different aspects and avenues, to build, a real holistic system for not only our cities to use and the county to use, but anybody who wants access to this type of information for, whatever their potential projects might be. Some of the fun ones that I've heard recently is insurance rate adjusters have been contacting me about CAMS. A few student projects looking at different densities of population and demographics types projects. So it may be addressing and it may be mundane, on the ground when you're actually doing it, but the uses and facilitations that it leads to is really helping our collective society and bringing together the people and the projects to build a better, county for us all. So that's my pie in the sky, I love you guys type intro. But thank you guys for being here. Anybody have any questions for after that? All right, so the agenda, I don't know if we want to do introductions of my consulting team. You guys all know Jeff Ledbetter from Datamark / Michael Baker is on the call.
And they know my voice as well recently, right?
Yeah. And I also have, I don't know if anybody on the call right now from One Spatial is on, but they're also one of the subcontractors and helping lead this effort. In a little bit, we're going to have a representative from Cal OES, Natasha, come and talk about the project and the potential funding. And then we're going to give the updates on the modernization. And then we're going to go into a question and answer session. I know several cities have been shooting me questions that I particularly don't have the answer to. So I want, maybe the collective to go ahead and potentially bring it up. And help the group build its collective knowledge a little bit. So yeah, does I don't know, Jeff, did you want to have people do introductions or just move on?
No, that's perfectly up to you. We've got about 30 folks here. If you want to move forward to Natasha, that's okay too. Whatever you think.
Yeah, let's move on to Natasha.
Okay.
If that's all right, Natasha.
No, that's good. Hi, my name is Natasha Potter. And can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got
okay. I don't have a presentation. I didn't know that I was doing a whole spiel. I thought I was just going to answer some questions, so bear with me. So I'll give you guys a little background into the whole NG911 kind of transition. I'm sure they're going to go in more detail, but pretty much the state is transitioning from a tabular data set that currently routes 911 traffic to the correct PSAP, which is just pretty much like a dispatch center and answering center is the easiest way to put it. And moving into the GIS world to kind of dictate in a better location of the caller. So we're hoping to use device-based location. We're building polygons. We have address points, center lines. So we're just trying to modernize it. So it's still very tabular. You'll be surprised how I think the system is 40 years old and it has not been updated. So we're just trying to bring it along and get it a little bit more current. So with that, I've been managing the project for the past almost 2 years now. They realized how big of a project this really is. So I just recently got a team. So now we're a team of 5. I have now transitioned from the project manager into the GIS supervisor. I have 2 GIS analysts, and then I have a couple admin employees as well. So we are breaking up kind of northern and southern to the 2 analysts. So once we kind of have that defined and I know exactly who's going to do LA, I will give you contact information for that person if you have any GIS based questions. I know you guys kind of wanted me to talk more about funding. So I'll give you like a generic spiel and then I'll allow you guys to kind of ask questions because I will be honest. The funding is written kind of vague with some gray areas for a reason. There's so many different, like LA, you guys are so vastly different from everywhere else. We couldn't make it be super straight and narrow because it wouldn't fit everybody. So since everybody works a little different, I had to write it kind of vague. So it really comes down to you guys asking me questions and giving me scenarios and I can kind of help guide you. And if you guys aren't comfortable with doing that on this call, my email is on the screen. Thank you guys very much for doing that for me. And you guys, please feel free to reach out to me and we can set up a quick call. I talk fast, as you guys can tell. So it'll be like a 10-15 minute conversation. So pretty much how LA is structured a little different, how the funding really operates is based off of census data. We went 44 cents per address point. I know GIS is normally population, but so let's just be honest, we had a budget. And then second of all, population doesn't really work for what we were trying to do. There might be 5 or 6 people living in one household. Not all 6 people are going to call 911 for the same event. So we had to kind of break it down into something that was more realistic for what we do. And we went based off of address point. Now, it does not mean that you only have to fix address points. It means that if you want to fix center lines, address points, polygons, whatever we need to route 911 calls, you're free to use that amount. It's just the mechanism we use to figure out your funding allotment. Now, normally how this works is the city can request funding for themselves as long as they roll that data up to the county, because the county is where the state is getting the information from. LA is a little different. So we broke, because you guys are so dense, we broke it up a little different. The county has a separate pot of funding for everything that they do. And then all the unincorporated areas, I guess I should say. And then we have another pot of funding for all the cities to, I guess, get a piece of the funding. Now, how you get that is it kind of is dependent on how many address points you're responsible for. So how many address points your particular city is responsible for, we multiply that by 44 cents, and that's kind of how you get your funding allotment. Again, you still have to roll it up to the county. It's kind of our only prerequisite. There's a couple different ways you can go about this. If you have a robust GIS team that has the ability to kind of update that and you're updating address lines, address points, center lines, or polygons. And by polygons, we mean PSAP polygons, fire, or EMS. You can seek reimbursement and kind of chip away at that if you want to get a CMAS vendor on board and kind of have them do some work. Again, for only those three things, then you can go that route. And then there is another version that's less traveled. But if you want to seek a non-CMAS vendor, then you would have to pay out of pocket and then seek reimbursement afterwards. A CMAS vendor just means that they are on state contract and that the state can pay them directly for the work being done. How you do that is you kind of shoot me an email. We can figure out how much funding your entity is going to be allotted. We can kind of talk through the options. You send me a scope of work with pricing included. Once it's approved and signed off on, then you're kind of off to the races. And then if they're a CMAS vendor, they bill the state directly after the work is complete. I know I just rattled off a bunch of stuff and I talk really fast. Is there any questions?
I see that Zach Robinson raised his hand. I think. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, Zach Robinson, City of Santa Monica. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for that presentation. I know you and I had emailed Natasha. I did have one question. If part of our work with a consultant is, identifying missing addresses, can that funding amount change after some initial work if we identify, a batch of new addresses that weren't in the original data set as far as funding goes? Or does the funding need to be determined before any work with a vendor begins?
It normally has to be determined before any work is done with the vendor.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I know there has to be some questions.
I guess I'll go ahead and ask some questions for some cities that have been talking to me.
Okay.
If they don't have GIS staff, can they just hire a vendor to do it all for them and then they continue to maintain it?
Yes.
Okay.
They can. It just depends on how much funding they have. So my caveat to that is, depending on how much funding is available, we normally can pay that initial amount. If there's funding left over, they can get us to pay maintenance for that. But if they exceed, like they utilize all their funding in one swoop, I can't confirm that we can pay for maintenance. I know that a maintenance plan is going to be discussed in the future. Right now, a lot of people are just in those initial, like this is just the first wave of funding. It's kind of a one-stop shop. Once you finish the funding, that's all we have right now. And we didn't want to take away the funding and go into maintenance because maintenance obviously is going to be a lot less funding. So right now I'm just leaving it as it is until more people can kind of start to reap the benefits of it, it is picking up. So I just can't guarantee that maintenance will be paid for in the future. That might be something that the agency might be responsible for.
So we have a question in the chat. So somebody had already completed the GIS work on the address point. Where or how do they seek the reimbursement process? How do they start off?
So if they send me an email, I can send you the forms. And the reason why they're not it just depends on what route you're going. So since I know you're going to seek reimbursement directly for work you've currently completed, then there's like 2 different forms you have to fill out, and I'll kind of send those to you. I already kind of have like a canned email that screenshots some of them and tells you exactly how to fill it out. I can send that to you and kind of walk you through the process. So just kind of shoot me an email and we can start that. And I'll probably, just a heads up, because I'm kind of transitioning. I've been a one-stop shop for 2 years. I will CC some of my GIS employees because they're going to kind of start to take over funding. But you can email me for now, and we'll start that process. You're welcome. Any other questions? Did you have some more, Rachel?
Do you know what type of vendors are on the CMAS list to be able to complete this work? Do you know any of the names off the top of your head?
It's okay. I know if one of my employees compiled a list. I can tell you the ones that I have seen come in, and by no means you're putting me in a tough spot because as a state employee, I, I can't kind of lean you towards any one vendor, but Datamart under Michael Baker's on there, Geocom is under there. There's another GIS vendor, I believe it's called Fallon. They work closely with a lot of the northern regions, and they work with North State, which is really Chico State up there, and they do a lot of outreach and a lot of work with the locals in like the northern rural areas of the county. I know there's some other ones. I don't know. One Spatial is, I don't think on a CMAS vendor. I think they're on a different state. Yes, you're right, Jeff. There you go. I knew it was wrong. I don't know if One Spatial is the CMAS vendor. I know they're under a different contract. I think it's internally for the state. So I have to double check on that one. Because they're a software. So I don't know if they're a CMAS vendor, but those are the few that I know offhand, but I know there might be one or two more that's on that list. And if you need a link to the CMAS website, I don't remember that off the top of my head, but if you reach out to me, I can send that to you. And there's certain like IDs and different stuff that I can send you as well if you need that. But
so another question that was posed to me previously was, are cities able to pool their money together in sort of like a consortium type method to get the address data aligned to the CalOES process?
so I'm having a conversation with that particular person. That is a hard one-stop shop answer. It really has a lot of caveats to it. It kind of depends on if one entity is going to be doing the work for the rest of the cities. I know some of the, are they going to hire a vendor and they're going to just compose all their money together and have one vendor do all the work for like all 3 or 4 cities? Is one entity going to do the work for them and seek reimbursement? They all have to apply individually. Like there is a lot of like gray areas, and it depends on their answers, how we can go about it. Technically, yes, and we can talk through it, but there's just, I can't just give you one answer. So it's a long, convoluted, and needs to have a conversation. But I am gonna have, I think later on today, I don't know if that person's on the phone today, but I am having a conversation with those people later today to kind of talk through some of those options. But technically the answer is yes.
Awesome. Does any of the attendees have any specific questions or random questions for Natasha?
This is Mark Renninger. I missed the beginning. Do we have a breakdown of the potential funding by jurisdiction in the county?
No, it's kind of, if you want to be honest, so yes and no. So it really goes by county. And then with LA, it's kind of broken down a little different. The county for the unincorporated areas has, because you guys are so dense, has one pot of money. And then all the cities have one pot of money. And then how you figure out your allotment is you kind of reach out to me, send me an email. I ask you how many address points you're responsible for. And then I take that number, multiply it by 44 cents, because it's really supposed to be based off of census data, but I kind of go on your word, to be honest, but if I have to check it, I will. And that's how we figure out each agency's allotment. The counties already have an allotment set because it's based off of census data, so they don't have the option to send me how many address points they're responsible, unfortunately for them, but the cities have a little bit more, I kind of work with them a little bit more.
Got it. Now, in our, so I don't think we've met before, Natasha. So I'm Mark Renninger. I run the addressing unit within the unincorporated, within the county.
Okay.
And we also have contract cities that we are responsible for.
Mhm.
So I guess we would potentially then just add those two together.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Okay. And then,
And I just need
is-
to know what cities they are.
yeah,
So in case they don't come for money, not saying they would, because most of the time if they don't do it, you guys do it for a reason. But I just need to know so I can track it on my end. But
yeah,
that,
no, not a problem. We know them. We know them exactly because they're under contract.
okay, then yeah, it's fine.
And then in terms of the, I think with Rachel, we can determine do you have like a description of the specifications or requirements for that? Or, in terms of what level of addresses are required to be created? I mean, are we going down to the unit level, or is it mostly the primary address point for every single, property or entrance?
You want me to be honest? I don't really care. As
Okay.
long as it says it's address point or it's center line, those are my only three requirements. It has to do something with the address point, the center line, or the boundary, because I didn't want to make it too stringent because, like I said, everybody's in such vast, like, everybody's in a different point in building their data. Some people don't have address points at all. There's some people who have address points but want to fine tune them a little bit more. Everybody was in such different states of data that I didn't want to make it to where I was only a select few can apply for it. So it
Gotcha.
doesn't really matter.
Now, one thing, I don't know if you've worked with Rachel. Rachel, have you provided the prior PSAP boundary files that I created like 4 years ago to Rachel? Or to Natasha, I'm sorry.
No, I have not.
Okay.
Because I know the Geocom contract that Natasha and CalWS have right now is managing those.
But I still need those. So if you
Yeah.
have them, send them
Yeah.
to me.
Okay.
Because that way, we can tweak ours if ours is off. So if you guys have PSAP boundaries, fire, EMS, please send them. We're asking for them.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that ours are aligned because they change. You know what I mean? So we are asking for the input of those boundaries as well. So if you have to make adjustments to those as well and you want to seek reimbursement for that, then that's also included.
Okay. So we could, I have a feeling that due to some recent annexations and some changes in city boundaries, right, we would probably need to update those, but we can provide you what we currently have.
Perfect.
Okay. And then if we wanted to update them, then we could identify that would be something that we would be doing. I can assign staff to work on that, and then we could seek reimbursement for those.
Mm-hmm. And then if you just send me an email and I'll, like the other lady, I don't know if you were on, because each avenue that you choose for reimbursement has different forms, of course, it's the state. So I can send you those forms for reimbursement and, kind of show you what you need to fill out and we can get it going from there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Wow, I'm surprised there are no other questions for you.
Oh, I don't know if I scare people. Maybe I'm talking too fast too early in the morning. I'm sorry.
I mean, so Natasha, I have a lot of other questions, but I didn't want to, take up everybody's time and kind of, in terms of the process for reimbursement, is that, sometimes transferring money is the hardest part of this whole thing.
Right.
So I can reach out to you or go through Rachel to identify the mechanism. You said that there's a couple of forms, right?
Yeah, and on the forms, because a lot of the times, depending on your county, sometimes it'll go back to general fund. So I kind of work you through, like, put it on the addressing exactly where you want it sent, because if you just kind of make it kind of broad, they will send it to general fund for your county or your city.
Uh-huh.
I haven't had that happen. Yeah, and I've had a couple counties do it. I have had no issues with it, but I just do give that caveat. So I kind of screenshot it, tell you exactly how to fill it out. Normally, as for the process, before it used to be a couple week turnaround. I would have to get it signed off by management. And normally it would take maybe like a month. I'll be honest, with us trying to start our phase cutovers and
Mm-hmm.
go live, it's been taking a little longer because I've been the only one doing it. So sometimes it takes me a couple weeks to kind of complete all the forms, get you tracking numbers, do all that, turn it around, and get management to sign it. So it has sometimes been taken up to like a month or so for the paperwork to get fully completed from, all the way through. And then we normally tell people 30 to 45 days once accounting hits. Since I am transitioning this over to my team, hopefully it won't take that long. And it'll only take like, maybe two or 3 weeks at most. So I'm hoping the turnaround won't be as long as it kind of currently has been the past 2 months.
Okay.
But normally once everything's signed, it's 30 to 45 days once everything's processed.
Gotcha. I probably have the finance folks on my side talk to be a part of that conversation with you. Rachel, have our existing CAMS points been provided to the state at this point?
Yes, they have.
Okay. I mean,
And
I feel sort of weird about the fact that you already have our data, right? And in terms of billing, do we charge reimbursement per address point that we create, or is it just for the address points that we've sent you? How does that?
Either one. If you're creating them to send it to us, then you can seek reimbursement for that. If you're creating them because they didn't currently exist, which I have a lot of counties that are like that, especially in more rural areas, you can seek reimbursement for that. If you're making changes to the address point, long as they're being funneled back to the state, mind you, if that's through Rachel, back up to us, as long as I have data incoming, then you can seek reimbursement for it, as long as it falls within one of those 3 buckets.
What about the existing address points that we've already transferred to you? Do we seek reimbursement for those? You said 44 cents per point. Is that? I'm just trying to be very clear about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not per like every single point. So like there's still a bucket that we have to pull out of. So the unincorporated area has its allotment, and I don't like giving out numbers on the phone when there's a ton of people on. So we won't talk direct numbers. We can do that offline, but you have a bucket, and so and we can talk about what that bucket is. And so if I only can reimburse for the physical year that we're currently in. So if you gave us stuff from like years prior, I can't do anything there. But if you gave us data, back until I believe the physical year starts in July, you have it's from July to June of this year to seek reimbursement for it. Does that make sense?
For the work that we've done this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then once July hits and they close the books, I can't do anything past that and the new physical year starts. So you can't start sending me reimbursement tickets for stuff that, happened in 2019, so it really has to be within the physical year, because I have some people who don't give me all their payments. Some people send it to me monthly and they kind of chip away at it. Some people do it quarterly. Some people forget. And then I have to tell them, unfortunately, I can't reimburse you for anything past, July. So there have been 1 or 2 people who have not been able to get reimbursement for 1 or 2 months just because they waited too long to send in those claims. So we'll have that caveat, but it's not every single time you create an address point, you get 44 cents. Like one of the other guys asked, normally we have that allotment set up in the beginning, and I need to know how many address points you're currently responsible for.
Okay.
And so that dictates how much funding you get. And then from there, you can, especially if you're doing reimbursement, normally you kind of chip away at that. I see very few people who seek reimbursement for their staff time and use all their money at once. Normally it's kind of an ongoing process. So you can keep chipping away at that reimbursement until it's exhausted pretty much.
Okay. Maybe can we schedule potentially a follow-up meeting with you on this one to go into more details?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. I'll reach out to you and Rachel with the rest of my team. Perfect.
Awesome. If that didn't stir any other questions from anybody, Natasha, I really appreciate your time taking the time to talk with us today and brief us on the state project.
No problem. And if anybody has any questions, like as you guys can tell, we can go down a rabbit hole because it's really contingent on what you're trying to do. If you guys have any questions or any more concerns that you guys didn't think about or didn't want to ask on this call, just shoot me an email and I can set up a call and we can go from there. But if that's it, I'm gonna hop off to get on another call.
Yep. Thank you very
All
much.
right. You guys have a good day.
You too.
All right, bye.
Natasha. So one of the things we wanted to do with this meeting was focus on those kind of public safety systems and GIS data and how your GIS data gets used in some public safety systems you may not even be aware about is that's what we wanted to focus on. And so we also made arrangements to have Brooke Shannon from a company called Rapid Deploy come and talk a little bit about some of the applications they're using in the California Peace apps. And really, the thing that I love about Brooks is that he is truly a GIS nerd at heart. So we can nerd out together. And Brooks, I don't know if you had a specific presentation or if you just want to talk through some things, but I can stop sharing and give you that, or.
You know, Jeff, I thank you for that introduction. And I don't actually have anything prepared today just yet. I thought it would be good for us to just maybe have a brief introductory conversation and perhaps look forward to another engagement where we could, dive a little deeper into, the product and how it utilizes some GIS data. But fortunately, the conversation I think can be had verbally, since it is relatively straightforward. How we utilize GIS data, and of course we can speak to the benefits of that. So I'd be happy to start discussing some of that if you'd like, Jeff.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for the introduction. My name is Brooke Shannon. I'm Vice President of GIS here at Rapid Deploy. I've been in the industry doing GIS for public safety and public safety systems that use GIS for 17 years at a variety of firms before coming over to what used to just be a CAD company, but what is so much more here at Rapid Deploy. And I've worked with Jeff and others here in the group within the NINA community working on standards development as well. So, very much appreciate the opportunity to kind of geek out a little bit with GIS and NG911 and public safety. What we're doing in California, I think, is really interesting. Cal OES procured 2 of our solutions, a mapping product called Radius Plus and an analytics product called Edge Analytics, or Eclipse rather, to focus on location accuracy trends, but to also give PSAPs tools that they can use to better respond to emergencies by fusing a location that comes from Alley along with device enhanced location directly from Apple and Google, and putting that on a map that integrates really well with Esri-based GIS. So I'm happy to report that every single PSAP within the state has access to Rapid Deploy Radius Plus and can use it free of charge. Cal OES is the one that has graciously provided that opportunity to the PSAPs in the state, which is a tremendous opportunity to kind of level the playing field and give every PSAP the same degree of functionality, regardless of their size and their budgets. So every PSAP has the ability to not only get 911 Alley locations, but also device enhanced locations from virtually every Google Android device and every iOS device that's iOS 12 or later, which I think is the iPhone 7S and everything later than that. So most contemporary cell phones.
Hey,
but
Brooke,
it also, yeah, go ahead. Sorry about
could you, because we do have kind of a mixed community here and very few that really understand PSAP operations, could you just help them understand the distinction between the Alley location and the device native location?
Absolutely. Happy to peel away the layers of the onion on that just a bit. So in a 911 PSAP, traditionally for years, certainly ever since I've been in public safety and, beyond that, location has been conveyed by the phone network, essentially by the 911 answering equipment and telephony equipment at the call center in the form of an Alley location, whether or not that's wireline 911 calls or wireless 911 calls, they'll get a data spill containing a location. In today's era, of course, with over 80% of 911 calls being wireless, the bulk of the locations come in are latitude and longitude based with a degree of uncertainty that describes the overall quality or accuracy of the location. That location is usually derived through GPS or cell tower triangulation means. There are some emerging technologies that assist there, but by and large, that kind of classic 911 alley location is really coarser grained and is often not very accurate. There could be times where in an urban environment, it locates you to, a few blocks radius from where the caller might be. It could be a few miles, or it could be worse. So a few years back, Apple and Google started making available what's called device-based hybrid location, which is computed on the device itself. The cellular network does not compute it. And it's really the same location that you see if you fire up Uber or Apple Maps or Google Maps or any other application that's going to use the device location itself, showing you that little blue dot of where you're located. That location can be provided over the top outside of the phone network to 911 call centers through a variety of technologies, including what we have at Rapid Deploy, which is a direct integration with Apple and Google, so that when the devices detect they're dialing 911, they can grab that location and they can immediately send it into Rapid Deploy. And they can do that every 5 or 10 seconds, depending on the the phone provider or the handset manufacturer. And the quality of that location is often significantly better, and we can get that location significantly faster than the traditional phone system can deliver and the phone networks can deliver. So you may have a situation where someone dials 911 and they're in a rural area. Coverage is not very good. The phone can't sense many cell towers, so triangulation doesn't work, and the caller could be within 2,000 meters of the location that is sent to the 911 telecommunicator, but a device-based hybrid location might get you down into 65 meters or less, oftentimes on the order of single digits. So Jeff, I think like that alone is a really powerful thing in 911, being able to more accurately locate wireless callers, and that thereby I think necessitates having higher quality GIS, because if you get a really accurate location with a really small uncertainty and you don't have any highly detailed, highly accurate GIS data, much less fresh GIS data to lay underneath of that point to see where it is on a map, that accurate location just doesn't do as good as it could. So that's something that I'm quite passionate about, and certainly am excited to see the work that everybody's been doing to improve data set quality, both for NG911 and for systems that just generally consume data in public safety. And that's something that I'm excited about with the Rapid Deploy Radius solution, is that it can utilize authoritative GIS that GIS data providers and curators maintain on a daily basis, simply by connecting to that data that's hosted on Esri ArcGIS Enterprise or Esri ArcGIS Online. It's just a matter of pointing our solution to a REST endpoint that exposes map services or feature services, if you're familiar with those on the Esri side of the house. And without a lot of extra provisioning steps to get it into our application, we can connect to that data, bring it in, and render it on a map along with this higher quality wireless location, giving telecommunicators a really powerful tool to better locate callers and improve emergency response times. And I wanted to mention this. There might be some on the call that are already aware of this, some of that are not, but we at Rapid Deploy, certainly want to work with our customers to make sure that they have access to the best quality GIS possible, so that their telecommunicators, are not looking at old data sets, commercial data sets, or data sets that came from yet another data silo. So when I learned about what CAMS was doing, I went ahead and reached out to Rachel, and I was super excited and really wanted to learn more. So again, thank you for the opportunity to come and share a little bit about what we're doing, but also see what we can do to be engaged and help out however we can in the mission of improving public safety more broadly.
So Brooks, I would say that another mixed audience among this group of GIS professionals here is cities that have varying degrees of kind of capability to support what you just described. From some that are, using file geodatabases to do their work in, some that have enterprise databases, but may or may not be serving them into web services, all the way up to kind of the full-blown enterprise GIS, where they could really have some low-hanging fruit, quick integration data with what you're talking about. Is there, do you have any kind of, I guess, advice if they have some things and they're curious about how they can help their PSAP improve the context of these maps, not only these maps, but all their other public safety systems as well? Kind of what would be your advice to how they could go about participating and making a difference with that?
It's a really good question, and you're absolutely spot on. And you know, time and time again, what I notice is that there's a lot of variability in what infrastructure exists, much less, you know, an agency's, you know, ability due to, you know, time and budgetary constraints and resources to, you know, to either stand up an enterprise environment or do that in such a way that it, you know, can support use in a 911 call center. So what I usually recommend to folks is that, you know, first see if there's an environment that does exist, and often there is a degree of support within the GIS organizations to either support something that maybe isn't 24/7 by 365, you know, highly available with the 5.9s SLA, but something that could be used as a primary resource that could then fall back to commercial data within a product like ours. But if that doesn't exist, if the GIS office or the GIS organization, you know, doesn't have a solution like that, or there are other barriers to implementing it, what we'll often do is we'll suggest reaching out and finding a hosting partner that could take the GIS data and host it on their behalf. Esri certainly provides hosting capabilities through ArcGIS Online, but one unfortunate aspect is that ArcGIS Online doesn't support the use of custom authoritative geocode services. They still have to be hosted inside of an ArcGIS enterprise instance. So there are a number of GIS vendors within the landscape that can take your GIS data, whether or not it's in filed geodatabases, old school shapefiles, what have you, package that up and simply publish it out to the web services that Jeff talked about, which our systems consume. So we ourselves have worked with a number of our users to do just that. And other users may have, at the very far end of the spectrum, a really robust, geographically redundant, highly available and fault tolerant ArcGIS enterprise system from Esri that they use to host their data, and some kind of sit in between. You know, they're okay having a system that maybe isn't 24/7 by 365 to host that data, because our system can fall back and use commercial sources if it does lose availability briefly during maintenance or unexpected outages.
Yeah, great. And I think one of the things you've heard Rachel and myself kind of preach throughout this modernization project that we're engaged in is that it's all about building relationships for you as the GIS manager, admin, you know, technician, whatever, analyst, forging relationships with the users of your data, right? The owners of your data, the users of your data, end users. And I think this is one point that's important, is that if you don't know who runs your PSAP and they don't know who you are, this is an opportunity to go to them and say, hey, I heard about this GIS thing that you may or may not be using, but I want to be a part of that and connect to your life-saving mission and really contribute to the better response of first responders out there in the field, and create that relationship and just start the conversation with them, and then of course they probably have heard of this initiative of the Rapid Deploy product. It was Radius Plus, right, Brooks?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Or even just referring to the PSAP managers I've spoken with, just call it Rapid Deploy.
Yep.
And that's okay too, right? So
Yep.
you're using this Rapid Deploy, this map product in your PSAP. You know, ask them for like a sit along and a tour of their center. They love to do those things, and it would be really eye opening, I suspect, for you as a GIS professional to kind of see the ways that they actually use spatial thinking in their jobs, the way that they use GIS data, and they just aren't aware that it's called GIS data. They refer to it as the map and things like that. So I think it's a good opportunity for everyone to kind of connect to how their data could be used if it's not already being used, and really find that partner that when you need to demonstrate your return on investment to your department heads, this is something that becomes really important as the technology evolves, as the PSAP use of different technology evolves. It'll become more and more critical that you have that relationship in place.
Yeah, and what this really spurs for me is maybe I should try, and I don't know if any of the attendees would really appreciate this, but having a joint meeting with the PSAP managers within LA County. We could try to co-host something together, maybe in the middle of the year, to sort of help bridge that gaps for you guys, that if you haven't outreach to them, or you don't really know what's going on within the PSAP world or the public safety world, to better build that bridge. So speak up if you think that's a horrible idea.
Quietness means it's a good idea.
Yeah. But just because this
That'd be
is
a really
something
fun
that
idea.
spans a lot.
Yeah, because the things that it could spur, out of that are a lot, and this is a good opportunity to start that up.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time, Brooks. Thanks for talking us through that. And I posted a link of the Radius Plus product in the chat, so everybody has access to that website. So they could see what it's about and forward it on to the people who could use it in the field.
So
No, thank you
this
for
is Mark
doing that.
Berenger. I have a question for you. So right within the full emergency response, there's usually two components, right? There's the call receiving, and then there's the dispatching components, correct? Which usually identifies which cars that they're going to dispatch. Have you been out to chat with our sheriff department on how they dispatch? I mean, that's both for Rapid Deploy and also for you, Rachel, because one of the things that they've got is it's a 1960s or 70s solution, but it has they're dispatching from multiple. It has to do with the way that the radios are set up, where they can actually dispatch multiple radios. It's more complicated, where they don't have just one dispatch center, right? It gets fairly complex, but the calls get routed to a central location, which then transfers it, I believe, or dispatches out of that. It's been a little while, but there was some complexity in terms of the standard dispatching arrangement that they have.
Interesting. I myself, this is Brooks, have not been out there. Rachel, have you?
No, I have not been able to get a reliable contact with the sheriffs.
And we've tried to get them into a discovery session throughout this modernization project, and we've not yet got a response from anybody.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, what are the two phases of dispatching, right? There's the call routing, which is kind of NG911, which routes the call to the correct dispatch center. But then that actual call response needs to then identify which vehicle or vehicles are actually going to respond, right? Based upon their nearest location or things of that nature, right?
Yep, you got it. Call routing is up to the point where the call gets delivered, and then the response routing or response dispatching would be, once the call comes in, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah, so I think it would be important, Rachel. I mean, maybe I can, it's been a while, but to talk to Grant Miller to see who the best person is to go see how their dispatch works. That a lot of that goes out of that their headquarters, right, sitting next to the ISD and fire dispatch out at the EOC.
Yeah.
There's that building across there. So they have because there's so many dispatches that they're running, and the radios become, the number of channels that they have, it gets complicated just because of the size. And so it gets a little bit, there's some tweaks to that you just may want to be aware of.
Yeah, we could investigate and, hopefully bring some of these newer solutions to them and have really help bridge a gap with what Cal OES is doing and what the county
Yeah.
sheriffs are doing.
So historically, what I've seen is that actually California and OES does a very good job of continuing to fund the upgrades to that first component. But the local dispatch centers always have issues with the second, the second component of that, of funding the upgrades to all of that infrastructure. So that's why we're still running like a 1970s radio system.
Yeah, we could probably talk about that at a different time
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
when it's not being recorded.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
it does, it works, but it just, it adds a level of complexity.
Definitely.
I think looking at the clock here, we've probably about time to get on to the next section of the meeting here, the modernization project update. So you guys have been involved in the educational workshops and the discovery analysis. So we've conducted, well, these numbers actually aren't accurate. We conducted more discovery sessions since we talked last, and we still didn't get everybody to the table, and that's no surprise. We fully expected that, but we feel like we have a good representative sample of jurisdictions from across the county, and they've all been very effective and helpful, and we thank you for that. As we've kind of gotten your feedback on whether you use CAMS, how you use it, what are some of the issues that you've experienced with it that modernization of the system would address. And so we've basically come to a close with that discovery analysis phase. The technical infrastructure phase is complete. Installation is complete. At the education session, that'll be on the 26th. I have that information at the end of the slideshow, so if I got the wrong date there, it'll show up there. But we'll have some additional, I'll just call it training. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be training, but some more exposure for you to the One Data Gateway that One Spatial put in place in this technical infrastructure phase. And how you can interact with it, what the modernization will look like. And so that I'll tap that topic again to pitch that educational workshop that's again on the 26th or so. That we'll be reviewing some of the recommendations for modernization there, and we'll be looking for your feedback. And One Spatial will be presenting kind of how you'll interface with the system and then what it's going to do with the data in the backside. But we'll be looking for your feedback on those modernization recommendations in that educational workshop as well. And then the thing that we're working the most on right now is the system design and implementation plan for that modernization. We'll also be building a regional address standard recommendations document, which will really form the basis of, from the county's perspective, the things that should be considered when establishing an addressing standard within your own city. And that's going to rely heavily on what Mark and his group already have in place for an addressing standard. But I wanted to kind of have an open discussion a little bit with the group here to see what are the major pain points that you're experiencing currently that we need to be sure that we get addressed in those regional addressing standards recommendations. Now, those are two different standards, and recommendations are two different things, and they're used in the title here very purposefully because what it's designed and intended to do, and Rachel, you can speak to this if I leave anything out or misspeak about it, but what's designed and intended to do is to give the framework from which a city within the county could start to forge an addressing standard of their own that would cause consistency with the data that the county is already putting out in terms of addressing. So this would be things like, what's the process to get a road name established? What's the process of assigning incremented addresses? You know, is it distance-based or grid-based and things like that? So what across the 88 cities in the county, there's a hodgepodge of answers on all those questions. Some have very good and updated addressing standards, some cities, all the way down to some cities that don't have any at all. And so even if it weren't to become like a standard or an ordinance or anything with real force in it, it could at least become best practices within an internal department that's assigning addresses, could at least become kind of a policy that your building and safety departments adopt to kind of give some backing to it. Or it could just be a checklist of recommendations that as your address technicians start doing things, at least they have a track to run on. So with that, I would like to kind of open it up to anybody out there to give us your pain points and the things that you can think of, the low-hanging fruit that you can think of about things that we need to be sure to consider in those address standard recommendations documents. And everybody should be in the scheme of the webinar able to talk, and if you can't, just raise your hand.
Well, I know for me, you know, trying to aggregate and, you know, work with the various county systems, you know, getting a recommendation on that, the CC line of the address notification list. Because I know I've realized that certain cities are sending it to either regional planning or public works or the assessors, but not always to each one and everyone. So, you know, there's a little gap in knowledge. So that would be something that I would put in a recommendation of, okay, if you need to send out a paper notification, you know, these are the county departments that you send it to ensure that it gets in the proper system if you're not, you know, yourself adding it into the CAMS system.
Yeah, so we could even take that a step further and not only give you specific recommendations for within the county, but also some generic recommendations for within most city organizations, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And maybe we have more weighted to GIS folks in the audience as opposed to addressing, but would love to hear from anybody that deals with that or deals with the address assigners on some things where consistency could be encouraged.
Hi, this is Bill from Glendale. You were talking about who to notify for addressing and such a moment ago, and I just wanted to add, should we also include the post office in that too? Don't they have their own database that they use for
Yeah.
you know, for mailing purposes and all that?
Yeah, I would definitely think that the post office should be on your list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can provide, this is Mark again, we can provide a list. I think there's about 12 different entities that we send all new addresses to. So those are things like post office, gas, electricity, right? The fire and sheriff department, all of that when we create a new address.
Yeah, and Julia chatted a question. I'm not sure everybody could see it, but yeah, so we're going to create this documentation as part of the modernization project. And then Rachel's intention is to share it with anybody across the county, you know, post it on the hub site and make sure that it's available and everybody knows about it. there you go.
Would you guys like to see like examples of addressing challenges and how to potentially resolve those, like visuals? Is that a bad idea?
Sure. Visuals are always good. Visuals are always good and examples are always good.
Yes, please.
You could probably give us a master course on that, couldn't you, Nick? Or Mark?
Sure.
Mark's assistant could.
Yeah. Well, the other question, I mean, I don't want to continue to talk too much, but there is one of the questions for the cities is that we have a unified house numbering guide for the county, which I think is while I think voluntary, it doesn't have ordinance effect, but it is a countywide standard for addressing. So address creation, naming, things of that nature. That's something that is out there.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
I think that definitely would be a good thing to get, maybe even posted as an appendix to the document.
Right.
Yeah, and Julia, I think I have it posted on the CAMS hub site. I'm trying to find it right now and I'm not seeing a logical place where I put it, but I'll go ahead and repost it right now just to make sure that everybody has access to it.
All right. Nobody wants to share their pain, that's okay. Just most importantly, I want everybody to be aware that that is part of this project and a deliverable that we'll be creating, so that you know that it's there for your use and benefit once we get everything delivered. All right, so let's see what else we got. Oh yes, this one is you, Rachel.
Oh yeah, so I wanted to have a group discussion. I know certain cities are, coming to me with some addressing related questions. And since I don't do addressing on a daily basis myself, I want to bring it to the larger group to sort of help the collective. So one email that I recently received was how cities are addressing ADUs. Whether they're following any standard protocols or any best practice recommendations. Zach has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking about asking that in the last slide. We're a small city, Santa Monica, and most new addresses nowadays are ADUs. We get about, at least one a week, new ADU in the city. We've just been addressing them as Unit B for the address. But, as I do more and more of those, I started thinking, well, should we be following some sort of format that indicates that it is an ADU? Because, of all of these ADUs I've added, there's really no easy way to query and find where the ADUs are in the address data set, because they're just going in as Unit B. So that's how we're doing it right now, but interested to hear if there's, a better way.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This is Nick from the county. We have a data set of ADUs that were approved by our department and the county, unincorporated areas that we were working on. We were dealing with the homeless mapping and such, but I'm not sure what we did with it exactly. But that would be a good layer to look at and see, okay, these were approved, and not everyone were built. Some were just approved. So, but for the ones that were built, it'd be good to check with Public Works, with Mark's team, with the addressing, and see what happened there for that. And for example, too, I live in the city of LA, and just down the street from me, there's a house that was there. They did some construction in the back. They built basically an ADU. And I was just showing my son this yesterday as we drove by. I said, look there's 2 addresses on this house now. There clearly is the main address on the house, and on the side gate, that's a nice fancy new gate for that back unit. There's another big address right there, clear as day, a new address. So I'm curious because in our current data set and what the assessor has, there's just one address there. But I'm curious what the city of LA is doing with that. And eventually, how are they dealing with their ADUs? Because the county has them, the city of LA probably has the most of anybody, of course.
Yeah, I know that I have to confirm this with Mark. I don't know what our hard and fast rule is on that, but I know a lot of what they do, what the team does is add, they use a half, they use fractional addresses for the ADUs to identify those, which has its strengths and weaknesses, but especially, you know, and what we're in Santa Monica, you have the same issue, right? Where there aren't a lot of addresses left, right? So you can't do whole numbers. And so I think using fractionals or units, I think it would make sense to maybe come up with a general, you know, a discussion around how we do that. Cause so you're using unit B. Yep. I think we use, I know halves for ADUs. I'm not sure if we add whole numbers if there appears to be the space for that, right? So
right, and I know
in the city of LA, my example, it's not a half. Sorry, my example in the city of LA, they just used a number in between the one that was next to it, but it's definitely a whole number.
Right.
Hey, Mark, this is Jose Mendanas. And just to clarify what you just said, we do issue halves for ADUs. However, it all depends because we also issue full addresses if it's applicable. Not all the ADUs are necessarily attached. And if they're separated, we try to give them a full number. However, if there is no space for full numbers, then we definitely go halves. So as far as ADUs are concerned, we leave it open, depends on what's practical. So everything's on a case-by-case basis. Typically, we would use the half, but sometimes halves are already issued, so letters comes into play. And I mean, we've had addresses that's been issued on a regular house that even has quarters and eighths. So I mean, those have occurred.
Good Lord. How does your database deal with that?
Not too well.
I mean, I guess that's the strength and weaknesses you're talking about, right, Mark? Is that
exactly those are the items that we're trying to clear up now.
There's challenges with fractionals and managing that in databases and schemas and things like that. That if you're not already in that practice, you may want to consider before you decide to.
Right. In Santa Monica, a number of years ago, they made the rule that they're no longer going to use fractional addresses. So we don't use fractional addresses for new addresses. So that's why we do the unit B.
That's also honestly probably a response challenge. I'd love to hear someday from a first responder too, if they are ever having any trouble locating a fractional unit, because they're, as so many unit designations are, they're kind of arbitrary and don't necessarily convey that they're in one location or another.
Yeah, I mean, the problem that we're going to run into, and I think it's a good discussion over time, is that whether or not you use a fractional or if you use a unit type designation, a lot of it, at least from my perspective, is the geocoders tend to, by default, not work too well against either of those cases.
Right.
So you have to identify, depending upon how you structure that, you have to look in two different places. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma that we have to figure out on the address lookup side as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point.
Another one to think about over time is we have addressing ADUs. Another one that's out there, less critical, but it does exist, are the utility addresses. So that's another thing that we may want to think about how we handle.
Well, and along those lines too, Mark, some of the conversation that I've had with particularly LA Fire, City Fire, is what about addresses that are not legal addresses, but are nonetheless are necessary for first responders to be able to understand where they're at. You know, ones where people just kind of put up their own mailbox and the Postal Service decides to start delivering to it, and all of a sudden it's viewed as legitimate, but it's not a legal address.
Yeah, we have to kind of discuss that with Rachel in terms of identifying either, you know, call it verified or unverified or legal or non-legal addresses. So it's definitely something that within our structure, we're working with Rachel to try to capture that. So that's an important thing. So obviously for public safety, it's important to be able to capture that information, but from a land management perspective, that's not a, you know, we don't want to recognize a non-legal address as legal and let people pull permits against it, for example.
Yeah, and with another client of mine, their building and safety folks got really upset at their public works department because they went and documented all of these. And then there's kind of this legal requirements on the city that, or maybe not requirements, but liability that comes about then because they knew about it. And their building and safety department was, you know, really perturbed because they had this load of tens of thousands of units that were not permitted that were now all of a sudden identified to them as they had to go investigate. So there are things to think about, downstream impacts of that as well.
Right. Just blame the post office.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, and I'm actually really disappointed that I haven't been able to find a replacement contact with the post office, because my last contact was really great to help you guys, you know, bring the knowledge of these challenges that you guys are facing with their, you know, view of, you know, what the addressing is and how we could better collaborate together. But Mark, do you have access to the Unified House Numbering Guide? I can't seem to find it on the CAMS site right now.
Yeah.
And I have it in PDF form, but I can't, you know, link it here. But if you have a website for it, they're asking in the chat. That'd be
Yes.
wonderful.
I'll go find that.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna place it on the CAMS website once I get my brain together. Oh,
Julia, let me
Jeff, do you mind? Yeah, unmuting Julia there.
Sorry. Nobody should be muted. So if you're trying to speak, just chat to us and we'll make sure you're not.
Roger that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Hi there.
Hi.
Okay. So I had a couple questions more about ADUs and everything. So like I had mentioned in the chat too, so I think only the panelists were able to see it. We are trying to establish standards to help with addressing in the future, no matter who comes into the position as the main addressing contact. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of the standards. So we're definitely interested in that. And in a discussion that we had, ADUs was a huge topic, specifically actually junior ADUs, which I didn't know they existed, this particular type of ADU,
Yeah, what
where
is
it's basically a junior ADU is apparently just a room that is sort of, it's attached to the building, but it's a separate unit.
Huh.
And previously, apparently this is a very recent change in regulation, but before you would basically be able to rent out this room to a family member, but now regulations have changed so that you can now rent out this room, just a room in a building to anyone. So you could put it on, Zillow or whatever. And so a couple of those have popped up at Whittier, and there's been a couple issues with whether, policy was that we wouldn't address them. If it came up, if it's in the building, we use the existing address. But apparently now there's some issues with, I guess there was one example that actually created its own, a separate electrical panel. And so then Edison was coming in asking, hey, what's the address for this? You need a separate address for this, but it's still in the same building. So now building was forced to sort of say, well, how do we address this? Do we make it a unit? And that's sort of where we're thinking. We are also in the same boat of not using fractional addresses when it comes to anything that's not utility, basically. So this is a fairly new thing. And again, something that I hadn't even heard of previously. So that was they tasked me with figuring out how to go about that. So I don't know if anyone's heard of that, if anyone can provide insight as to how to go forward with that.
I would say you could certainly have any kind of unit designation you'd like. So for instance, in this case, apartment might be appropriate, but room could also be a unit designation for you. Because you're right, if it's part of the main structure, it's part of the house, it's part of sounds like this may be even going on in places that aren't necessarily residential, but if it's part of the main structure, I would think that you would not want to give it a main address, right? So it needs to be a sub-address element, and it probably would be in a unit field as opposed to kind of a suffix to an address number or something like that. And that would give you some flexibility to make those room designations, or I said room, I meant unit designations, whatever you wanted them to be as appropriate.
Yeah, I know that that was what I suggested. I mean, no matter what, if it's, and I think part of the question too was, well, do we set a standard that all junior ADUs need to have an address, or is it on a case-by-case basis? Because maybe you create, and again, I'm sort of imagining like a junior ADU, just to sort of help with this, is that maybe it's a room that's in the back of the house that has its own entrance potentially, but is maybe attached to maybe or may not be accessible to the rest of the house, right? So then it's sort of separate, but still within the building, right? And then it has its own entrance so that you could rent it out very easily while maintaining some privacy. But I imagine that maybe someone creates a junior ADU with the intention to rent it out to a family member, but that can change. And once that changes, then USPS will need to have a mailing address, most likely, especially if someone, it's not like you're going to share the same mailbox with your landlord, Yeah. You could, but but I imagine that it might be best to just put a blanket, standard of saying, well, I think all ADUs, regardless of whether it's attached or not, definitely if it's not attached, but if it is, probably better safe than sorry to give it its own address. But again, it's also like, well, then if it shares the same electrical panel, does it really need one?
Well,
I don't know.
I would suggest that you make it as flexible as possible, right? And only issue an address when you have to issue an address, which in the case of an electrical panel may be what brings it on.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay. So units and then I will relay the information to keep it as flexible as possible. Especially, I mean, if it has its own panel, then absolutely, and to give it a unit, and we can decide whether it's, you know, an A or a B, or even, I mean, that's sort of the standard we usually use, letters to label an ADU. But yeah, and I should also mention that I also reached out to Chris Chu at USPS. Rachel, if you are interested in having maybe a new contact for USPS, Chris Chu has answered a couple questions for me, and it was part of a meeting that you were in too at the City of Whittier back in July, and so he could be a good contact for you. And he also suggested, you know, as for the USPS is as far as they're concerned with ADUs, they would like actually just a primary number for the unit, especially if it's detached. He did not elaborate on attached ADUs, but as far as detached ones, if it's its own structure, USPS would prefer a non-unit address. If it's possible to give it its own housing number, that's what they suggest, give it via its own number. And then if it's not possible, they actually say to give both buildings a unit address, which I thought was really interesting. Could be interesting to have USPS in one of these calls, actually, maybe. But I'd like to ask Chris more about that, but we'll see. I'm just telling you what I heard from him.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I'll reach out, and then Anthony, thanks Jeff for posting that comment from Anthony about the utility companies, the service point IDs. Maybe it'd be really helpful to go ahead and bring, you know, a representative from a utility company and the USPS to sort of talk about this a little bit further and see, you know, which ones how they would prefer it, and see how we could work that into, you know, various implementation standards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea, because I mean, when I think about this question, I think of both mailing and utility. So absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm glad I brought this one up.
I appreciate it, certainly.
Does anybody have any other questions or issues that they've been facing that they want to ask the collective knowledge about?
The Mind Hive.
Not yet. Well, feel free to continue sending them to me. I may not respond because I have no idea, but I'll at least try to help you get the answers that you need and you're wanting.
Yeah, I have a
Raise their hand.
question.
Brandon, go ahead.
There's another meeting at 1:30. I had some questions that more so involved not overall CAMS workflows, more just our own workflows. When can I ask that? Later on at 1:30 or?
Yeah, we could do that at 1:30. Your question was particularly about the unique identifiers of the addresses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could go ahead and ask it now just to see what the cities are wanting. Or
Okay. Yeah, we have separate databases outside of CAMS that has address history whenever there was an address change. And then we have it in like an access table. And then we have a few like PDFs for whenever we assign a new address documentation. And so I was trying to basically link these data sets, the PDFs, to CAMS, and then also the address history database to CAMS. It's called the HN change database. And then so even though I can't join it like through an address field, like the full address field, if the full address field changes in CAMS, then it would break, the join. So I was trying to figure out if CAMS has a unique field that would be static or not change, even if the address changes. That way, the records there will still be joined.
Yeah, this is something we definitely need to look into on having, these designators for.
Yeah, is
Sorry,
there potentially a way? I mean, just a thought, Rachel. I know that maybe we can add a way to add attachments to address points, right? Like, so you, Brandon, as opposed to linking the document, you just load the document into the CAMS database directly, so it sits there along with it. Just a thought.
you guys are gonna make me cry.
Yeah, I
One of
thought
the-
about that too. Just, but I was not sure about like the space size, the SQL Server database to like attach.
Oh no,
like
they're on
records
Amazon.
to.
It's unlimited space forever.
Okay.
Yeah, but we
That
can
would
talk about
only
that.
that would only resolve the PDF issue, but then the HN change, trying to link those records.
Well, so, I mean, Brandon, the goal with that database, as we're talking about, is to take that historical database, load it into CAMS, and then throw it away, or just tag it as coming from that source, and then we don't need to touch that database ever again.
But the thing is the address history, like if something is an old address or a new address, and then if we throw away that information, then we would not be able to, address appropriately for future if we do not have all the data.
Yeah, and we could look more into this, offline. But I think, keeping that institutional knowledge is really good in the history of, what's out there by establishing these unique identifiers to sort of link everything together. And I know Nina has recommendations on how to establish, the source of it in the, I forget exactly what field they call it. Jeff, if you could remind me, it's like a discrepancy agency ID with the point info, something like that.
Discrepancy agency ID, that's right, would not tie the record, would not be unique to the record, but would tie who owns the record for discrepancies. But there's also the NINA NGO ID field, which would be unique. But I think one of the things that we're going to have in our recommendations is to create a unique persistent ID for CAMS records. I think there is one in the old schema, in the existing schema, I should say, but I'm not recalling whether that's an accurate statement, and so I wanted to be careful about saying that. But I think there's a couple of IDs, but they were not necessarily pinned on persistent foundations, and so we are going to recommend in the modernization that a new persistent unique ID be created that's really a CAMS record ID, and that's really what you need there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. I do want to let you guys know that for addressing authorities, we are going to have the contributor training that's using the One Spatial Data Gateway. So you could learn the technical details on submitting your data into this new CAMS system when it's officially launched, so that you get a better idea of what's exactly going on, how you could go ahead and start mapping your information back and forth from CAMS and the different tools and functionalities within it. I'm gonna, in the meeting summary, I'm gonna go ahead and send you guys the link to this meeting, to this contributor training as well. That's scheduled for the same time as this meeting. So I think it's 9:30 on January 19th. So that's next Tuesday. And then our next event is going to be, you want to switch the slide, Jeff?
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, the CAMS educational session, the impacts of the local data providers in the modernized CAMS, you know, thinking about what you guys are going to have to go to submit your data into CAMS, different considerations, things of that nature. We're going to talk about the week after. So January 26th at 9:30. And I believe the registration link to that is open somewhere.
That one is open and available. And we've got it linked here. So if you look at the slides after this, you'll be able to click the link and go to it. Otherwise, you should have gotten it also in the email reminding you of today's meeting. And we'll probably send another one out maybe next week just to remind you of this and include the link there as well.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it seems like the CAMS website would be a good place. CAMS website would be a good place for some of these meeting notices, right? I think you have some of them there, actually.
yeah, I have
So-
this one and then the January 26th one. I haven't added in the one for next week just yet because that was just scheduled. But yeah, some of the pages I realize are not working on the CAMS site right now. Thanks, Nick, for bringing that to my attention. I'll go ahead and work on that today to help resolve it. But feel free, if you guys see anything
It's just the
funky
one.
on the site and have questions, please let me know about it so I can get working on it.
Rachel, just a couple note. I can't find the house number guide right now online, so I will get that up online and send you that link. But I did email it to you, so if you want to send that out to everybody on the presentation or everybody who's here.
Yep, we'll go ahead and send that out as a PDF to everybody on this call that's registered, so we could get it.
Yeah, and in the future, I'll get it up there so that you can have a link to it. That should be up there.
Awesome, thank you
I
very
also
much.
sent you the PSAP boundaries that we have. So we'll talk about that.
Awesome. Jeff, what other things do we have on the slide deck?
I think that's pretty much it. We just got a reminder that there is a hub site.
Yep, there you go.
And that's it, yeah.
And there's my email address if you guys don't have it already. Does anybody have any questions, comments, curse words for me? All right. If not, I really appreciate you guys taking the time today. You know, this is really building an awesome system for not only our county, but the entire state and CalWES to be able to use. And we're really hopefully leading the charge in this effort at such a grand scale. So I really appreciate you guys and your efforts and your time.
All righty, everybody have a great day. We
Great.
look forward to seeing you on the 19th and 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.